Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
We're just waiting. There she is. Okay. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Hi guys.
Hi.
How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, I'm great.
Good.
So, introduce it.
Well, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Michelee Smith Tynes. I am a journalist, I'm a teacher, I'm an author. You can find my book, Taming the Beast of Anxiety, on Amazon. Um, and I just have a passion for life and a passion for people.
Cool.
Very nice.
So, yeah, we're the Collective Minds Talk Show. This is at My Mind Mentor, and this is Associated Soma. And the point of this Instagram page is really to kind of show and kind of help other professionals or advocates of mental health or therapists or life coaches or mentors or authors, and show other people how collaboration is really necessary to present more of a holistic approach towards helping people. Because there's so many different people who have different experiences, say, for your example, with anxiety, that a typical therapist might not have. So we're really trying to bridge that communication gap and present this kind of new norm as collaboration between all the people within different realms of the mental health field, in order to help clients and help them in a more holistic way. So that's what we're doing with this page, and therefore we reach out to therapists and life coaches and people who are in that field to kind of pick their brain and discuss topics that could really help other people out.
Well, I love having my brain picked, so looks like we're a good fit. I do want to say, I over pandemic and lockdown, I started a show called A Conversation with a host, Laura Lou. And one thing that was nice, and one thing that I was hoping for, was to be able to see women of different backgrounds, different races, being able to come together. She's training to be a clinician. I would be considered a patient in the equation, but I'm very articulate, and I've been able to sort of articulate my journey through anxiety. So that was really interesting. We finished 8 episodes, which is an entire season. So we're excited about that. And that's sort of an aside, but it's also in line with what you were saying. I feel that we as human beings need to learn how to work together. That's intraracially. So in other words, I need to learn how to work with other Black people, and other Black people need to learn how to work with me. But then we also need to learn how to work, with people of other races. And it's incredibly important. I mean, I think that way we actually start seeing each other as humans. Interestingly enough, we just start seeing each other as humans.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about articulation and communication and language, because that in itself, I think, is a really interesting kind of dynamic. I know we're going a little bit off of the questions we had prepared, but
Okay.
I just find is your ability to articulate your journey through anxiety, like you just mentioned, is just such a wealth of value to people who have difficulty articulating what's going on in their mind and their body. And that's kind of what we lack, is that communication skill
Yes.
collectively. So that's
And
interesting. I'm
so
glad to do that.
therapists really get a lot of articulation from their clients. Number one, many clients cannot articulate the process of what they've been through. And number two, we get, maybe 50 minutes of your time, in my case, once a month. And that's far too little to really be able to understand the effectiveness of what's being done. So it's just interesting that I'm able to, um, I think I have seen that therapists and clinicians have seen me as being a wealth of information because I can talk about the journey. So that's actually been awesome. I've been glad
Yeah,
to be a in that way.
that's an important aspect.
Absolutely.
So walk us through. the kind of your origin story. I'm curious to get down to your vulnerability and your struggles that really made all of this articulation possible, and the reason for why you are doing what you're doing.
Well, that is actually a really great question. I don't see a therapist anymore for my anxiety because obviously I wrote a book about it. And the difference with me is I practice what I preach. I use my own book. In fact, on the first page of my book, I actually dedicated it to myself. So even though it's written by Michelee, this is a note to Michelee, from Michelee, love Michelee, so all of that journey started because the one thing that I still have to see a therapist for is my codependency issues. So one thing that's important as a client is realizing there are some things that you can't fix yourself. You need guidance. In the end, you always fix it yourself, though. That's the thing. You always heal yourself as a patient. Your therapist guides you to the answer with their expertise and with their knowledge. So basically, I was born to a single mother who was what's called late deafened. So her hearing gradually declined throughout time. And with that process, there was a lot of responsibility put on me at a very early age. However, it developed my linguistic skills. I write very well and I speak very well. So at around maybe 6 or 7, maybe 8, I was being put on phone calls with mortgage companies to settle something, or gas companies to settle something. You might see these types of responsibilities being placed on children who are bilingual and have a parent that speaks only one language. As a teacher, I've seen that type of stress put on kids. And I do want to note that it's not anything that my mother did advertently. So part of my journey and my awakening is realizing that for each of us, we do the best we can with what we have at the time. When we get more at another time, we do something different. So obviously this developed a skill and a gift in me anyway. But it was a lot of pressure and stress. And so I developed a lot of codependency issues. And I even see that now in my parenting, the way that I'm raising my youngest child, the way that I raised my stepkids and my oldest son. It has come out in a lot of different ways. And so that's the one area where I'm kind of nitpicky, and I know I need a therapist to help me with that because I can't even always identify it myself. But basically, that's my origin story. I was her only child, and that responsibility, that great responsibility, was put on me at an early age. But I think I've evolved enough to see the gift that came with it, but also know the importance of setting boundaries.
Okay, cool. So you've developed a lot of anxiety from that relationship. Is that where that stems from?
Anxiety. I was wanting to write things down word for word. And even in therapy recently, I noticed that if I'm getting to a point where I'm trying to write things down verbatim, it's actually a signal for me that my anxiety might be getting out of control because I revert back to that little girl. So that's something that I noticed in myself. If I'm writing and I'm taking notes here and there, no big deal, major points, major concepts, then I know that I'm at ease. So the biggest part of all of this has been me learning to know, who is Michelee? Who is this human being? Me getting to know myself.
So what is anxiety for you?
That is such a good question because it's something different for everyone. The way that I usually experience anxiety, and it's important in the book, I discuss anxiety surges. So a surge could just be like you are noticing that your anxiety is ramping up. You're seeing that it's coming up, but it's not a full-blown panic attack. A panic attack experience for me has been racing heart, can't breathe, feeling like I'm going to pass out, and literally feeling like I'm going to die. Like when I've had panic attacks, I have thought that I was going to die. Since I started realizing what was happening, I cured myself of panic attacks. I have not had any panic attacks since I wrote this book and went through the phases that I'll share with you in a moment. But for me, it's usually my face will feel flushed. I might feel a little bit dizzy. I might feel a little bit nauseous. And it's hard for me to concentrate. Like I can't concentrate on what people are saying, can't concentrate on what I'm reading. Even a television show, I'll go back several times. So I think an important thing also when we ask this question of people is what are your triggers? You know, knowing what is it that's bringing this up in you so that you can identify what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, you know, like you said, anxiety, panic, they're all very different. They're very individualistic. So really honing in on what are your symptoms and then trying to get to that place of reflection and find those triggers, right? So that you can stop or replace habits to kind of to manage those triggers. So I think that's really something important that you know, clients need to know, is that it's all very individualistic. But you did talk about your phases and how you actually healed yourself from the panic attack. So can you touch on those phases? And
of course. Now, before I go into this, I would like to share that I'm also an NDE survivor. I had a near-death experience in 2017. So if you want to talk about anxiety, find yourself trapped in between the world of the living and the world of the dead. That's it right there. And then my husband also experienced a great deal of anxiety because I did not have an advance directive. I do advance directive talks on Thursdays. And so he was presented with this information and how should we put her on a ventilator and for how long. So that's another really big place in my life that I experienced a lot of anxiety. When I came out, you know, my therapist was talking to me about delusions and such matters. But even now, I still consider that I was traveling in between dimensions. Those were not delusions. Those were actual experiences. So having gone through that experience was one thing. Then another thing, I had a life coach at the time that had a group of women. And collectively, we wrote a book called the Push Past It Playbook. And the 5-page story that I put there actually developed into this book. And at that time, there were only 4 phases. And then I started realizing that a lot of this is connecting us to our own selves. So the phases that I came up with is first, we're assuming that you know that what you're experiencing is anxiety. That's why the book is called Taming the Beast of Anxiety. But I'm learning that some people really don't even know how they're feeling. Like you think you're feeling anxious, but you're actually depressed, or you're frustrated. Sometimes you're even just bored, you know? So the book is written with the assumption that you have identified that what you are experiencing is indeed anxiety. After that, we have to acknowledge that you're feeling anxiety, which actually settles some of your nerves in the first place because anxiety has never been written on a person's death certificate. Anxiety alone is not going to kill you. In fact, as a feeling, it's mentioned as being anxious. Okay. So you first have to acknowledge that you're feeling anxious. If you're feeling anxious about something that a normal person would feel anxious about, then that's helpful too. Okay. If I'm anxious because there's a piece of lint on this blanket and it's making me uncomfortable, then I need to rethink that. I might need a professional to guide me through that. But if I'm anxious because I had to file for bankruptcy and I'm worried about liens being placed on my property, anybody's going to feel anxious for that. So first we acknowledge that. After that, we question anxiety. We don't get afraid of it. We vigorously interrogate. Who are you? Where did you come from? What's your name? What's your mama name? You know what I'm saying? Like, who are your friends? And what are you here to teach me? Is there some lesson that you have come to present me with? That can be done with a therapist. So, some people can't deal with anxiety on their own. So a therapist is helpful. And so the next phase is to vent. You need to talk about it. Talk about it and maybe list the things that you're coming up with so that you can come up with a plan. The venting process and the healing process alone takes time. indeed, grief and healing are lifelong. It took me a long time to realize that. There'll be a trigger that will come up and you'll have to deal with it over and over again. But the next step is to cope with anxiety. So one of the things that's so cool in my book is one of my coping mechanisms is art. So I put some of my artwork in the book.
Wow.
Yeah, different that I do. Some people also call this distract yourself. So
Wow.
some of I'm sorry, you were just trying to zoom in on it.
Okay, cool.
Wow. Very.
So those are just some of the things that I do to cope. I also have what's called sanctuary in a box, where I'll put like aromatherapy or maybe little scriptures or little inspirational quotes. I should have put it next to me. It's over there. I might go get it. But and even some of that putty, you know, they have scented putty now. And sometimes you just need a few seconds to distract yourself or to connect with your inner child. Like for me, if it's cold, fuzzy socks, I don't know why, but I love fuzzy socks and matching pajamas. Give yourself a chance to be a little boy. Get some action figures, or a little girl. Get your fuzzy socks and your tea or something. You got to settle yourself down, because actually getting to the next step, the fifth step, which is to solve your problems, sometimes it takes time. You can't do it overnight, and you have to be patient. So the next step actually is to start solving your problems one by one. List them. And when you check them off of your list, you're going to be surprised how much less anxious you feel when you are accomplishing things. Probably an evil cousin of anxiety is procrastination. And when you procrastinate, the only thing that happens is things build up and they get worse. So as you start checking those things off your list, you'll start to feel more secure within yourself. Now, the next two are extremely important, and they don't seem like phases, but indeed they are. As I said, as you start to solve your problems, you start feeling better about yourself. So the sixth phase is love, self-love. And I wanted to call it compassion, but everything else was a verb, so I couldn't really use compassion. But when you have compassion for yourself, you exhibit equal parts love, patience, and forgiveness. You allow yourself to have a human experience. If you didn't call the credit company that day, that's fine. If you made a mistake 15 years ago, that's fine. That was part of your journey as a human being. So being able to forgive yourself. And then the last phase of anxiety, when you actually spiral out of it, you know that you've spiraled out of it when you connect. You connect to your purpose. I believe that each of us came here with a gift, something to present to the world, to heal the world. And when you connect with that, you will start to see your anxiety dissipate. Now, I do want to mention one thing. It's important to note that when you're connecting with your purpose, sometimes you feel nervous, and that might feel like anxiety, but it's not. That's why it's so important to identify what it is that you're feeling.
Wow, that's a really great comprehensive process of dissecting, categorizing, and processing anxiety. I personally really love how you were able to really create a process. I'm all about processing and algorithms and creating steps, and it reminds me a lot about what I've created. I created a mind analysis summary and report, which is basically a lot. It's very similar to what you're doing, only it's more of like a question-based process that somebody writes down a whole bunch of questions. I present them with a report that they fill out, all types of questions to identify things like anxiety, fears, and what makes you angry, what makes you happy, your vision, your goals, the worst narrative of yourself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I take that and I analyze it, and I provide them back with an extremely comprehensive report that kind of highlights all their potential problem areas and highlights all the potential solutions and the different steps and the different avenues that they could take to kind of resolve those over the next 12 months. And I find that type of approach, like you're doing, to give somebody that phase is structured of how to tackle something like anxiety is so important and necessary. And it's it's a great tool because now somebody could take that report or take even your book that they fill out with all the phases and bring it to a therapist or bring it to a mentor or bring it to a life coach and process it over the next year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, what you're saying is extremely important. My journey with even going to a therapist began with a racial profiling incident when I was 14. It was incredibly traumatic. Guns were pulled out on myself and my mother. And my mother, like I said, is deaf. So I jumped out and said, don't shoot, and not realizing they could have shot me. So, but I realized, so I started therapy at 14. And I realized over time, I continued going to therapy, but I realized I was a really lazy patient. But it was because I was expecting to be fixed. I was expecting someone to fix me instead of what you're doing is you're telling patients that they need a therapy plan. I had no clue to even ask for a therapy plan. So you're letting them know, look, this is up to you. This is your journey. I'm your companion and I'm accompanying you on it. And I can show you some pitfalls so you don't step over there and twist your ankle. But aside from that, you're going to have to heal yourself. So that second phase of questioning, I started to find was incredibly important. You're very right.
Yeah, it's very much about self-reflection and self-awareness as a lifestyle and not as a one kind of a one-off exercise that I think a lot of people have that misconception. You know, they think, oh, I know all my problems. Like, that's not going to help me. I need drugs. But it's like, no, you need to continuously self-analyze and be self-aware for the rest of your life. It's every moment to moment we change, and that's something that people don't understand is we're never the same from moment to moment. So you're constantly going to have to go back to that mindset to be self-aware and self-analyze and self-reflect. And I'm curious because like we said, we like to really have this collaboration mindset where, you know, in the process of healing or self-analyzing or self-reflecting, whatever you want to call it, we really find that having, say, like in an ideal world, a therapist, a life coach, and a mentor all focusing on the same client. So do you have anything like that? I know you said you had a life coach and you had a therapist. Have you had a mentor that had helped you kind of along this process and create this phased book and structure and plan for anxiety?
I'm gonna one of the books that I read by Don Miguel Ruiz, I pray that's the right one, the son of the man who wrote the Four Agreements. It's called The Wisdom of the Shamans. And that book was really powerful to me because I learned that I am my own shaman. Part of what I did in my near-death experience was when I was between those dimensions, I was looking for someone to save me, not realizing I had to save myself. So with that, I think I have a life coach, but she's really a lot more like a friend, but she's very close to me spiritually. So she can identify things that some other people can't. And sometimes she has to tell me tough things that I don't want to hear. I do have a therapist that I see once a month. I've started going to Codependence Anonymous so that I can get help more than once a month. You know, the medical plan that I have only allows once a month, which I think is treacherous. 50 minutes once a month is, you really can't heal that way. But I must say, I also take a Buddhist philosophy class. When I went to Japan here, I met an Indian woman and she introduced me to Tibet House. And I started taking Nalanda diploma courses there. And it's interesting because my Gishila, which is basically the name for teacher, he was saying exactly the same thing that you're saying, that, you know, increments over time. You're not going to grow to be a guru or even a simple human, an adult, in one day. It takes micro changes that happen over time, but they're consistently happening. They're always happening. So I don't get a chance to interact with him one-on-one because he's in India, but he's still my teacher. So, but I think my journey is a little bit unique to some because I'm a teacher myself. And so I look at things through the lens of a teacher. So I feel like those 3 or 4 right now are helpful for me. But I must say in my book, I do have one method that I call spread yourself thin. When you think of spread yourself thin, you usually think you're dividing yourself in too many different projects. But actually, to me, what spread yourself thin means is if you have many friends like I do, or even if you don't, you can try to make more friends. And then you can break your life down into pieces and you can see what you want to work with each of those friends on. So I might have a friend that's really good with finances, and I'll share with that friend that, oh, I had trouble with my taxes. And my taxes give me a lot of anxiety. Do you have any clue for that? And then you just talk to that one friend about that. I mean, of course, other things from their life as well. But then you might have another friend that's had a successful marriage. With that friend, you might feel comfortable sharing, well, I've been having trouble with my wife or with my husband. Do you think you could help? And then that way you get that layer of protection that you're talking about, where you're not just having one person deal with all of your stuff, because that's too much for any one person anyway, honestly. Even your therapist. Do you guys agree? Like nobody can deal with just all of your everything.
No. And I
About this about an hour ago.
Yeah, because I was even, I work at an outpatient and my caseload is up right now, and over 60 clients that I see, and I see 40 of them weekly. And the idea of having like an interdisciplinary team, or having those outside sources, or like spreading yourself thin, as you call it, right? That, for me, I've seen keeps people more accountable and keeps people on track of healing, right?
Yes.
But coming to see me and it's once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month, even for 45 to 50 minutes, there's nothing in between that's helping you stay on that path. And sometimes, I mean, I needed it. Like, I even see a therapist still, and I still need accountability between those sessions, even being a therapist, and knowing the tools and having the education. I still need that team. And I feel, the mental health system as of right now is lacking that. And then unfortunately, throw in the insurance and all of that stuff, which is a whole nother topic, but it's just, it's very lacking. So I think, touching on that and spreading yourself thin and having all those outlets, even if they are just friends, right? Having those really keep you grounded and keeping you on that path to the self-healing.
Yeah, and one thing just I want to note is, because some people do not have those friends, some people do not have those types of people in their lives who are grounded enough, experienced enough, intelligent enough, and have that knowledge to help them appropriately. So you'll find that people will go to their friends, and their friends are just giving them very bad advice. So that's why I'm into this whole situation, because I don't consider myself a life coach, and we've detailed between a life coach, a therapist, and a mentor in a different post on our page. But essentially, a mentor is more somebody like a professional friend. I have knowledge, I have certifications, I've been in this kind of field for a long time, that I know exactly what I'm saying to the person and where it comes from in terms of a scientific background. Although I'm not going to help you specifically with goals like a life coach would, and I'm not going to help you any traumas like a therapist would, but I can basically support the therapist and support the life coach and help on my own with my own philosophy and my own experience in life. And that dynamic is so essential for people, and otherwise they're left to finding only a therapist or finding only a life coach, and then relying on friends that have no real background on what they're talking. They're just very biased with their subjectivity and their own emotional traumas that they project as advice onto their friends. And that could be a very dangerous situation.
What you're saying is so correct. And I think over the years, I've developed a lot more compassion for people who end up with substance abuse issues, because the trauma that you discuss I believe it can only be dealt with a therapist. There are very few people that can climb out of that hole and be true survivors that have successful lives. So that is definitely true. One of the things that we talk about in my Buddhist philosophy class is that everyone, all sentient beings, animals, insects, people, the thing that we want most is to get rid of our suffering and to have the maximum happiness in life. So as we start to see that we connect with one another and we support each other in those goals, it becomes a lot more interconnected. It's not like, oh my gosh, this person is taking my time. Going back to the issue of substance abuse, if a person got trapped in that in their teens, late teens, 18, maybe 20 years old, they end up with that mentality for a very long time in their lives, if not forever, if they don't seek to change it. So that being the case, you're very right. Some of their surrounding friends have that same mentality and they try to spiral out, but they cannot, because those friends are dragging them down, and it's the only companionship and connection that they have. So I do have compassion for that, but one of the things that I listed as a help for that is, if you're going to a support group, get out of your comfort zone and ask for a phone number if you're able to. Some groups don't allow you to do that. But try to ask for a phone number. Join Facebook groups. I have a Facebook group called Taming the Beast of Anxiety. I just got it started. But my hope for that is that people can learn to support one another, because it's hard out there. It is. And believe it or not, I've had to really do a lot of work to realize everybody's not like me. Everybody doesn't have 5,000 friends in 15 different continents and countries, so it's not that easy for everybody to do certain things, but I still feel that there are ways to get the support that you need. I just choose to believe that.
Yeah, there are.
I agree.
Even with I love how you're in a Buddhist philosophy class. That's something that I'm also very passionate about. But even with just the adoption and of the understanding of how interconnected we are on a conscious and energetic level, can be just enough for some people to really feel the help from everyone else without actually having that support group. At least that's something I really found to help me, because I don't necessarily have a bunch of friends, but I've developed, from my own practices and my own methods, how to feel the wisdom of interconnectivity on a much more realistic level of my consciousness that I can use day to day to deal with struggles and stress and things like that.
Some people are a lot more tactile as well. And I've learned that I'm not just a teacher of elementary students, I'm a teacher of human beings. So there's something called, I believe, and I hope I'm quoting it correctly, I think it's called Blue Mountain mushroom. You can look it up. If you look at this mushroom that grows out of the earth, you'll look at one little piece of it and you'll think, oh, that's a tiny little mushroom. And you might see some scattered throughout in different parts of the landscape. But that one mushroom extends, I believe, 2.1 miles or something like that, and is the biggest living organism on Earth. So you are just seeing this much of it. Just like you are looking in the mirror, just seeing this reflection of yourself. But you are interconnected to whoever it is that you believe created you. I believe that somebody created us. And I believe that before we came here, we sort of made a pact. We made a deal. We co-created. And we had this image of what we were going to accomplish in this life. So like I said, the last step of connecting to your purpose, that's where you start stepping out of your comfort zone and saying, well, you're my therapist. How can I get more interaction? You might encourage your therapist to start a support group. That's what support groups are for, so that we can see that we are interconnected. Sometimes if I listen to somebody explain their problem, I realize it's the same problem that I have, and I see how they dealt with it. I call those shortcuts, you know. Sometimes those are just little shortcuts to help you out.
Well, cool. Hey, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, this was really.
I think we might have gone off a little bit. I forget the questions we originally
I know,
wanted to ask. But
I think it was great anyway.
One of them, okay, the last one was, I believe, let me make sure. I try to come prepared, guys. Doesn't always work. Oh, one of the things I wanted to say, you asked who my book was for. And I know that most people that market nowadays, they tell you to niche down or be specific. But I must be honest, this little book right here is for anyone of any age. Even on the back, I said, people of all ages and backgrounds deal with anxiety. Even those who have been in and out of therapy struggle with anxiety. Yet so many seem to stay trapped in a cycle. Your anxiety has kept you up at night. Your anxiety has robbed you of your self-esteem. Your anxiety may have even cost you your job. But the situation is, you know, I first felt depressed at only 8 years old. I was only 8 years old. I didn't know that as depression at that time, but I felt that level of despair at 8 years old. So a very astute 8-year-old could get through this book. It's not even that much there. And a lot of it is filling out assignments about yourself. An elderly person, a lot of elderly people struggle with depression, could get through this book. 20 somethings could get through this book. So, I mean, really, I do say that my book is for everyone. And I do want to mention that I even have a section in my book about dealing with suicidal thoughts. It comes out backwards on Instagram, but I thought that was very important because I did struggle with suicidal thoughts for quite a while. And when you get trapped in that cycle, it's very hard without the help of a professional to get out of that. First of all, we need to understand that. And one of the things that I realized was that, you know, I wanted the emotional pain to stop. I didn't really want to die. I don't like pain and I don't like messy things. So I didn't want to. Yeah, someone's uniquely psyched. Thank you for joining us here. Said it's vicious. That cycle is vicious that you get into. And so, you know, I realizing that I didn't want to die, but I wanted the emotional pain to stop. That meant everything for me. And then connecting to Psalms 139 in the Bible helped me personally. And that scripture talks about how you were knitted in your mother's womb. So that means that I had to have been a soul. I was a soul before I was a body. And God loved me then. That's what I think of. I know that everyone has different religious perspectives, but that definitely helped me. So those were the things that were important for me to include in the book, because we think that young children don't deal with suicidal thoughts, but we have been seeing 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds that make a decision that their life is not worth it anymore. And I didn't want to write a whole book and not at least acknowledge that.
Right.
So the last thing that we had, and I do want to make sure that I say this. You said, what is my message to the world?
Yes.
So this is my message to the world. Love. You got to start with self-love. When you love yourself, you're going to treat other people better. You're going to treat when you treat yourself good, by default, you treat others well. So the message is just simply to love yourself, to take care of yourself, to be patient and forgiving with yourself, give yourself new opportunities and chances. And sometimes I look at baby pictures of myself, because when I raised my kids, I wasn't that hard on them to where I would not allow them an opportunity to make a mistake if they were learning how to walk. Really? Oh, what's wrong with you? You're trying to learn how to walk and you keep falling. What is your problem? Never would a mother do that. So I try to connect with that baby of myself. And so most of the time I have so much love that seriously it's overflowing on everybody. It's even too much for my family. I mean, good thing that we have to wear masks now, because I used to hug everybody and, you know, look them in their eyes and make sure they were okay, because I have that much love for myself. So that's my message for the world. Just one word, love. You figure out what it means to you. Love.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll,
you. Thank
do this
you.
again
Yeah.
sometime in the future. We should do this again sometime in the future.
Anytime. I'm easily accessible, and obviously I love to talk. So you
Well,
guys, what I would like to say though, what both of you are doing is amazing and great, and it makes me feel so much promise for the next generation of therapists and coaches and helpers, assisters, supporters. So I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. It is totally amazing. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're
Thank you very
welcome.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, thank
We'll
you.
talk to you later.
Have a good weekend.